The future of the world rests in the hands of America. The future of America rests on the backs of 80 million working men and women and their children. We are facing a grave crisis in our national life. The few who profit from the labor of the masses want to organize the workers into an army which will protect the interests of the capitalists. You are urged to add to the heavy burdens you already bear the burden of a large army and many additional hardships and warships. It is in your power to refuse to carry the artillery and the dreadnoughts and to shake off some of the burdens too, some such as limousines, steam yachts, and country estates. You do not need to make a great noise about it. With the silence and dignity of creators, you can end wars and the system of selfishness and exploitation that causes wars. All you need to do is bring about this stupendous revolution is to straighten up and fold your arms. That was Helen Keller in her essay, Strike Against War. Hello and welcome back to the library. And before we get lost amongst the stacks, I want to introduce my guest this week, a reintroduction, my best man, and the proud member of the Itty Bitty Litty Committee, Jason Midkiff. Now, Jason, how are you doing?
I'm back.
Yeah, we've known each other our entire lives, and I wanted to start with the diatribe to say and go listen to the first part if this is kind of going to feel weird. We ended basically where Helen Keller is only 12 years old, and this is going to be a much different episode because this part is going to be the part that people don't really know about her, right? So when I said it in that diatribe, basically what I felt was if you know about a person, it makes the jokes a lot funnier, right? So here we are, making fun of these same jokes that we were raised on, you know, as I hold my child in one hand and I made dead baby jokes about 1,000,000 times.
Oh, yeah. Especially like that one that got hit by the shovel. Yeah. That was devastating. What was his name? Little Timmy?
I always think of I can't think of Salsa the same way in the rest of my life. Yeah.
She doesn't like sauce.
No, not yet. She's still on that milk sauce, though. Yeah, earlier today, she was on that double IPA sauce after telling us she wasn't able to drink.
Much.
Yeah, she wanted to do her taxes later. Listen to her go.
Yeah, that's why she got kicked out of the bar.
Yeah, she got stopped being served. Sorry, they're all like, next time don't flirt with somebody's boyfriend in front of them. That's your daddy telling you that advice. All right, well, yeah. Before we go on, do you want to add anything new to your opinions about Helen Keller? Anything you want to say?
No, I'm ready to hear about her life. The part we don't know.
Yeah, let's hop right in. She moved right after she left the Perkins School in Beantown from Boston to the big bad city, New York, where she would attend the Wright Humason School for the Deaf. That's all we're going to say about that. There's not much to say else. After a couple of years there, she would attend the Cambridge School for Girls. This, and from her own words, was her first experience in a school where she calls normal people attended, and would be there again for basically the entirety of her education. We're talking about Anne Sullivan here. Remember her. It is difficult to overstate how much help Helen got. Basically, mostly from Anne in her early childhood, but a lot of people helped Helen Keller out, like a lot. Even though she was a bright human being, she needed somebody to help translate audible language into something she could feel to speak and understand. And at Cambridge, those people were the principal and the German language teacher. They learned how to sign in her palm in order for her to attend the school, and which also helped Helen learn German and French through Braille.
Wow.
Which is nuts.
Yeah.
Now, she also tried to learn pronunciation of these two languages through words that are supposed to sound based on what was written on her Braille paper, which must have been interesting.
Mm-hmm. Can only imagine.
Dude, I tried to speak French on this podcast a bunch of times. I took 4 years of French, and I listened to how it's supposed to sound, and boy, howdy, am I bad at it. And now imagine somebody who's never heard French in their lives before. At least they have a pass. You know, at least Helen Keller, maybe the French were nice enough to say, like, no, she can't hear or speak, or excuse me, or see. We're going to give her a pass here. Yeah. Quinn, that was mean. You shouldn't have said that about her. Some jokes go too far.
That was decent French, though.
So this school wasn't really right for her, the Cambridge school. For once, she made some friends, but she was also kind of bullied. She was taken out of the Cambridge school and got a private tutor. You see, at the Cambridge school, she developed a new goal now, and that was to attend Radcliffe College. Radcliffe College was the women's college equivalent to Harvard. She basically said she wanted to attend Harvard, Jason.
Wow.
In order to pass her exams, she also had to learn ancient Greek and Latin. She also excelled in literature specifically. You want to know her weakness?
Doesn't sound like anything.
Algebra.
You don't say.
I get it, I guess. Who can blame her? Too many X's and Y's next to numbers. That probably confuses somebody with Braille. Has to speak Braille.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Who knows?
Probably thought she was playing tic-tac-toe, I guess.
She took the entrance exams without any additional tutor and no additional help other than the fact that it was written in Braille. She passed, and then she gained admittance in 1900 at the age of 20. She started to attend Harvard, basically. She lived at Briggs Hall, South House. I don't know what that means, but somebody will find out interesting. Apparently, Quinn's been there before, huh? Yeah, Quinn, is it time to take a nap? All right, this is where we pause. And I'm back. Sometimes with a baby, they fall asleep in your arms crying. And it's cute. Every time, it's cute. So, yeah, she was able to attend school because she had a ton of support, finding books in Braille that were part of her syllabus and curriculum. Again, translated for her by her tutors and mentors in Braille. While she was in Radcliffe, word got out that there was a deaf-blind girl attending Harvard. This sparked the interest and later platonic admiration of one Mark Twain. You know who Mark Twain is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Famous for painting fences white with all that lead-based paint, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mark Twain would introduce to her... He would introduce her to Henry and Abby Huddleston Rogers. These names you probably don't know because I didn't. But Henry Huddleston Rogers was a very, very, one would say extremely wealthy person because he was the oil magnate of Standard Oil. This couple would pay for her education. It was also while at Harvard that she began to write an autobiography of her life. The Story of My Life was published in 1903 when she was 22, which was mostly the source I used for the first part of this series. It's a two-part series. It was a well-received book enough and became an instrumental piece of literature in advocating education to those born with disabilities, specifically the ones Helen had, but all ones who are born with disabilities at one point. Of course, she could not write this by herself solely and played a huge role. But there was also another person involved in the editing and publishing process, Harvard University professor John Albert Macy. John Macy and Anne Sullivan probably were dating for a while, but they definitely got married in 1905. So that's very nice. That's where that help came from. Helen would publish a few other things while she was at Radcliffe. She would graduate Phi Beta Kappa and became famous throughout the world for being the first deafblind person to ever earn a Bachelor's of Arts degree. MVP from frickin' Radcliffe College or Harvard, none other. Really, pretty impressive. Nothing else important ever happens to her of her interests. I've already made this joke in the first part. But before we move on, I will say about the story of my life is it makes a lot of sense to somebody was helping edit her editing and writing for sure. But even if that is the case, it's still a pretty impressive feat. It's like 200 pages long here or there. Her imagery is excellent, no jokes intended. It's clear to me that she is able to replicate a lot of what would be her surroundings based on the books she read and the descriptions other people provide. If you want to know about her early life, you would probably need to read this realistically. Almost all of her stuff is available online, and most of what I read that was available was on Project Gutenberg, so you can find the source here, there, or everywhere pretty easily. So, any questions?
No questions, no.
No. She also wrote Optimism, an essay, while she was attending Radcliffe College. Published in 1903, it's a 77-line essay about optimism. Right?
It's optimistic.
Yeah, it is optimistic to think of optimism in the way that way. It is a super religious piece of literature, and that shouldn't be surprising that somebody who got so much support and had to overcome a crazy challenge was crazy religious. I read it. And to sum it up, it basically is you're finding optimism through yourself and through God, and God through yourself, and God is yourself, yada, yada, yada. Helen Keller would first learn about God in a very detailed and established way when she was 11 years old, when she met the American Episcopalian clergyman and author Phillips Brooks, not to be confused with her younger brother, Philip Brooks Keller.
A lot of Phillips.
Phillips Brooks, and yes, I'm intentionally pluralizing his first name because that's what it was for some really dumb reason, was pretty influential preacher back in this day. That's all I'm going to say about him. Who cares? Helen Keller wrote and published a book called The World I Live in 1908. This, to simplify, is a book about how she perceives the world, stating things like how smell should hold a higher place in the world, how it is the most important sense for her, and we neglect and disparage it all the time, which is kind of true. There's a whole thought in science about how pheromones is what actually causes the synaptors, or whatever science term it is I'm completely inaccurately describing, how we fall in love. She also writes about her dreams, about how she dreams of spirits that visit her, about the odor she smells and the feelings she has. Here's an example of one of the visions she has. Quote, "Another spirit which visits me often brings a sensation of cool dampness, such as one feels on a chill November night when the window is open. The spirit stops just beyond my reach, sways back and forth like a creature in grief. My blood is chilled and seems to freeze in my veins. I try to move, but my body is still, and I cannot even cry out. After a while, the spirit passes on, and I say to myself shudderingly, 'That was death. I wonder if he has taken her,'" unquote. Yeah. Pretty deep stuff.
Wow. Descriptive.
Yeah, she was. She didn't have the same imagery that we would have in our dreams either, or here. For if you're asking that question, she would experience these sensations. Since I am a fan of poetry, I also like to state that Helen Keller once wrote a pretty long poem that got published in January of 1910 called "The Song of the Stone Wall," which is her reflection of her blindness and deafness by using imagery and comparisons to the stone walls in New England, which are everywhere. We passed one earlier today when we went on our little disc golf adventure, and you probably didn't even notice it, honestly.
No, I missed it.
They line everywhere in New England. Yeah. It's a bit boring, to be honest, and her best works are her memoirs, her essays, and eventual travelogues. I think she gets this because she basically never writes anything else like this again, like she understands that she's not good at poetry. Just to highlight what I mean, here's the second stanza. "The walls have many things to tell me, and the days are long. I come and listen. My hand is upon the stones, and the tale I fain would hear is of the men who built the walls, and of the God who made the stones and the work." Yeah, not very riveting stuff, right? It's difficult to overstate how the world I live in and the story of my life impacted the need to educate those who do not have the resources or were considered unteachable due to the standards of that time and even to this day. People who are deaf and blind have a much more difficult time in getting an education and navigating the world. simply put. And Helen Keller is somebody who basically became one of the biggest names, faces, and dare I say voices of this kind of advocacy. Pretty much immediately after graduating college, Helen Keller became a world-renowned advocate for people with disabilities, and her popularity only grew in the 1910s, which we'll get to shortly. She became like an instant celebrity, and she was a celebrity basically all her life. There's no other way of putting it. Because of the last work we'll touch upon is a series of essays. At the moment, we'll talk about other things, but these are a series of essays she wrote in 1913 called Out of the Dark, because, get it?
You don't say.
Do you get why she called it Out of the Dark?
I think I have a guess.
Okay. Is there anything you want to say about it?
Probably wasn't very bright.
Where she was at?
Yeah.
The rooms, all of them?
Yeah.
Or outside?
Maybe because they didn't have lights or anything.
Oh.
Yeah.
This was a book that contained essays about socialism. And though it may shock some people, Helen Keller was a devout socialist and Christian for the rest of her life once she started reading about these concepts. She was a Christian socialist, a hardcore one. And I find it rather suspicious that we basically stop learning about Helen Keller once Christian socialism comes into play. Like, when she's the most popular throughout the world. Like, she's traveling, and I mean the world, like New Zealand, Australia, Japan, like India, like everywhere, like all of Europe in the 1910s. It's not an easy feat to do.
No.
Where she's not hopping on a plane, right? She's getting on a ship, getting seasick. Imagine a deafblind person on a ship. It's a lot of fun. I mean, she probably could hold herself, but like, yeah.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah. Well, if you don't believe me, right, about her socialist ties, well, she became an official member of the Socialist Party of America as early as 1909, when she was 29, where she actively wrote and campaigned in support of the socialist candidates and even voted and advocated for Eugene V. Debs when he ran for presidency. Eugene V. Debs was probably the closest thing we ever got to a third-party socialist candidate who could have won, and he only won around 6% of the vote in total. But he was a huge figure in American history, realistically, that helped form railroad unions in this country for better or for worse. She was a big fan of this thing called Georgism, which is often misconstrued as an advocacy for a single tax throughout all functions of society, when it really should be remembered as all things in society should be shared equally among everyone. I mean, she got so involved with socialist politics that she joined the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, a.k.a. the Wobblies. Yes. This is her own words when she joined the Wobblies. Quote, I became an IWW because I found out the Socialist Party was too slow. It is sinking in the political bog. It is almost, if not quite, impossible for the party to keep its revolutionary character so long as it occupies a place under the government and seeks office under it. The government does not stand for the interest the Socialist Party is supposed to represent. Unquote. Pretty radical stuff if you know anything about the Wobblies. They were one of the most... They're still around. They were one of the most radical groups, and they were the biggest union ever to exist, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Because they weren't a union of skilled workers. Anybody can be a wobbly. So, I mean, you don't teach this stuff in history anymore. That's the issue. No. Like, it's maybe a footnote somewhere. So, the Wobblies were enormous in the 1910s, in the 1920s, and they really got squashed, partially starting the World War II. And they started getting repressed pretty significantly for their anti-war sentiments. Not World War II, World War I. Excuse me. She referenced the 1912 Lawrence textile strike directly, which was started when weekly wages dropped in accordance to the weekend working week hours for women and children. When that was dropped from a heroin 56 hours a week to a much more reasonable 54 hours a week.
Yeah,
those 2 hours.
Very reasonable.
Yeah, they're fucking
big negotiations.
Yeah, huge. So they had weekly wages, right? They weren't paid hourly. They dropped the weekly wages those 2 hours. That means that their take-home pay was reduced by 32 cents. So they were working around 16 cents an hour. Them lazy mothers and them 8-year-olds who are the only ones with such small hands that could fit in them tiny spaces deserve, like, they were just, they wanted more. They didn't want, they just were so spoiled. It was a lot of money to this people, honestly, this 32 cents. And the employer at Everett Mill just told them to go fuck off. A bunch of people were hurt. And they kind of lost that strike. But she said that, quote, the Lawrence strike, why? Because I discovered that the true idea of the IWW is not only to better conditions, but to get them for all people and to get them at once, unquote. So, interesting. I mean, that makes sense, right? Like, she wants equality and advocacy for everybody. Especially the disabled. And she's not the type of person who would say that women should have the right to vote, but let's focus on civil rights first. Then it's like, why not everything? Why not? Right? Pretty unique stuff here. And radical for her day. And her socialist writings didn't stop there. I had to look up through an archive called Marxist.org. So take this with a grain of salt. But there's some great information there. Anytime you look up Marxists, you're going to have to look it up with a grain of salt. Trust me, they embellish a shit ton. And here are some of the titles and works of essays and interviews that she did from 1918 to 1928. We're not going to dive into them. We're just going to talk about the titles right here. Workers' Rights, How I Became a Socialist, Why Men Need Women's Suffrage, New Vision for the Blind.
Very clever on that one. I see what they did there.
I see what she did there.
Very clever.
I definitely see it. Strike Against War, End the Blockade of the Soviet Russia, and the Spirit of Lenin, written in 1929, which I think one of the, just something she might have regretted later in life when she wrote The Spirit of Lenin, honestly. The Help Soviet Russia one specifically was written in 1921 during one of the world's worst famines where 5 to 10 million people died due to the incompetency of the Bolsheviks, honestly. And the aid from the U.S., some might even call it the U.S. aid, if we're feeling frisky, was led by none other than the great socialist and leftist thinker Herbert Hoover to send money and food there. Yeah, even one of the most conservative presidents we ever had in America sent money when there was starving people. Who would have thought? Some sort of empathy existed at one point. Of course, I'm not kidding. It actually happened. Herbert Hoover was neither one of these things, socialist or leftist. It just so happens that conservatives once had a soul when they saw millions of children starving. Going back to the chronology here, in 1915, Helen Keller helped start the Helen Keller Organization. Now it's known as Helen Keller International. On their website, it claims Helen Keller International continues the legacy of our co-founder, Helen Keller, who fiercely advocated for people who would have been otherwise left behind. Today, Helen Keller International helps children and families in 20 countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, and the United States grow and eat nutritious foods, stave off malnutrition, build strong immune systems, access life-saving medical treatments, and prevent and treat blindness and vision loss. By providing the right support at the right time, we help millions of families and communities overcome long-standing cycles of poverty, helping them create lasting change in their own lives. I didn't look too far into this org, so please let me know if there's any scam against their name, any controversial shit. I just did the superficial looking here. But still, I mean, on the surface, cool.
Yeah.
In 1916, she sent money in the support of the NAACP, stating she was ashamed of the Southern and unchristian treatment of people from the South. So there you have it. She definitely was not somebody who was super racist at all. At all. No.
Nope.
Finally, to wrap up this decade, in 1920, Helen Keller was instrumental in founding the American Civil Liberties Union, otherwise known as ACLU. They definitely have sided with some controversial people and some people who would probably be just plain evil in the past. But the ACLU is no joke one of the greatest organizations of the U.S. of motherfucking A, defending all of America's liberties and their civil liberties. Her role, I believe, is mainly to support financially and put her name in the development of it. But to this day, it's the ACLU is staffed by 500 attorneys and is still functioning actively. You know who the ACLU is, right?
I don't know.
Okay, the ACLU is one of the coolest things. They're one of the reasons why we have like freedom of speech laws that are so ingrained, right? They fight a lot of good fights for us. Right. They also like fought for, I think it was Klansmen, for their right to protest and their freedom of speech as well. Fucked up, but that they won that and they sided with them. But like, like
freedom of speech,
moral victories sometimes have complicated fucking people involved with it, I guess. It's one. That's just one thing. Freedom of speech is one thing altogether. Like they fight strongly for abortion laws and stuff. They are very much pro the Constitution group, right, in the civil liberties in the way. Now, I often don't quote Wikipedia directly, though I did use this to cross-reference it, and I needed to find some sources because I was getting exhausted. But this just sums up a lot of her beliefs. Quote, she was a suffragist, pacifist, Christian socialist, birth control supporter, and an opponent of Woodrow Wilson. Now, we're going to have to pivot wildly here to some of Helen's beliefs, at least at the time when she was in her 40s. Because in 1915, there was the baby Bollinger case that happened. This was a case where an American doctor named Harry Hazelden decided not to perform surgery on a baby in an attempt to save the child's life. Baby Bollinger was, in fact, the first of multiple deaths that might have been preventable if Hazelden decided to perform potential life-saving surgery when he didn't, though I honestly have no clue what kind of surgery we're talking about here whatsoever. The doctor defended himself in court, saying such deaths were a regular occurrence and allowing this particular baby to live would have been unfair and cruel to the life of the baby. Now, this case began to make national news in the 1920s, from my understanding, and Helen, being an advocate for disabilities, people wanted to know what she had to say. Here is the response I found in the Journal of Teaching Disability Studies that sums up what she had to say. Quote, Keller sided with the doctor and even wrote publicly in his defense, arguing the humane decision was not to let the idiot, her word, die. Was to let the idiot, her word, die. It was a shocking stand for a woman who had built a career by campaigning against the assumptions of society of who the disabled are and what they are capable of doing. The Keller, a disability was something to overcome, as she perceived that she had done it her entire life, something the baby would not be able to do. Further, it states she personally struggled to be seen as somebody more than disabled, desiring to be an advocate for women, the poor, minorities, and governmental reform too. Yet at the same time, she argued in support of eugenics. So that's where we're at. It was a popular science back in the day in the 1910s, and she was for it in the 1920s. Now, if you don't know about eugenics is a discredited study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. The baby Bollinger case became a case surrounding eugenics pretty quickly. So complicated figures here with Miss Helen Keller, right? Now, Jason, we just talked about a pretty dark thing, right?
I'd say so.
Yeah. We also talked about a lot of socialist things, right? Where a lot of her writings, a lot of her speeches came from when she was in her 30s and 40s and basically for the rest of her life. We've come this far, and we haven't touched upon any of the hard-hitting topics yet. First one I wanted to ask was, what vices did she have? Like, did she drink? How did she have fun? What food did she like? And in fact, the answer is yes. According to tastingtable.com, she was a regular drinker, and she preferred margaritas. She preferred martinis, but also had a fondness for whiskey.
Good.
Yeah. So,
I like to hear it.
So, yeah, she got tipsy.
Good.
Her and Anne Sullivan, sometimes for fun, would also perform on vaudeville, which is... She would perform on stage in vaudeville. Crazy, sometimes even really crazy racist shows. When returning from a trip from Japan, remember this, she was constantly traveling through her life, like, as fun. She's also credited for introducing Akita dogs to the United States.
Wow.
Her favorite food was the hot dog. So
all the things that she's done in her life and her favorite foods, the hot dog.
If that's not
all that background, and that's your favorite food.
And if that isn't a little bit of like subtle, not symbolism, but yeah, subtle symbolism, but also a subtle foreshadowing, which is the sexiest of all literary devices for this next question. And this is the one I really had was, well, did she fuck? did she die a virgin? Before we answer that, I do want to shoehorn something that I couldn't fit in her young childhood. So we're going to have to put a pause on that, guys. Suspense. So your answer is no. This is another quote from Anne about Helen, specifically about the time she was at Mass and she learned of wine for the first time. Quote, when the communion service began, she smelt the wine and sniffed so loud that everyone in church could hear her. When the wine was passed to our neighbor, he was obliged to stand up and prevent her taking it away from him. I was never so glad to get out of a place as I was to leave that church, unquote. She would have drank it too. So we're jumping back and forth, but I think that was objectively funny.
I heard they fist fought over that wine, her and the priest.
I mean, there was a lot of finger playing about why she shouldn't have done that. I don't know if it was in Beantown. I think that was in Alabama. I'm pretty sure I saw a kid also once like do that when they received their first communion. It was like sniff it so loud everybody could hear it and then try to chug it. I think that's like a memory I have. Now that the serious question, right? And like we're here to ask serious questions, and I don't shy away from sexuality on this podcast because to me like that is part of a person's personality. And if we're going to talk about people, we're going to talk about literature. It's about a reflection of humanity. And it's, I think, important. So, did she fuck? And you'll be surprised the answer is an astounding yes. She had at least one affair.
Good. I'm not surprised.
Good.
She's a human. She needs it too. Yeah. She needs some loving.
Now, this comes with some potentially messed up caveats and deserves the explanation of it comes with some messed up caveats. In her 30s, around the time she was in her deep socialist phase, Anne Sullivan became ill and needed to recover. They needed a temporary assistant. There was a man that came named Peter Fagan. Wired.com does a write-up about a book called Helen Keller in Love by Rosie Sultan that I find salacious and a bit ridiculous. So let's just quote that article directly. Well, quote, when Anne Sullivan, Helen's constant companion and conduit to the world, becomes ill, the pair is forced to bring in another assistant, a man, to help the now famous Helen with her stage presentations and her correspondence. Peter Fagan captures Helen's heart, enticing her to break some rules and wonder why it might be like to be touched by a man. After a lifetime of virginity, of trusting her entire being to Anne Sullivan, Helen's sense of guilt about the relationship caused her much conflict. Unquote. Though this is a bit ridiculous, it is true that these two have an affair. Peter Fagan, his nickname was the finger-spelling socialist.
Spelling out the old alphabet.
Just gonna let that air clear out before we move on. The room needs a breeze.
Well done, Peter.
There's definitely a big possibility the spelling socialist, gotta use the deafblind woman. There's a possibility.
It sounds like love to me.
But Helen also confers that she wanted to elope with this man. Like, she loved him in a way. She writes a ton about love, about God's love specifically, but about love of being in alive. When she was younger more than when she was older, but like, dude, the word love just comes up all the time. And I don't find it hard to believe that she might have fell in love with Peter, nor do I actually find it hard to conceive that Helen understood that this might have just been a fling. She might even have experienced serious heartbreak. Who knows? So there you have it, guys. We concluded that Helen Keller fucked. Moving on.
And it was her right. It was her right.
Moving on.
Moving out. From being in.
Oh God, you literally cannot make up the nickname finger spelling socialist Like, that's just...
Yep. Not even trying to hide it.
No. When Helen got into her middle age, she started to write more about her religious beliefs and continued to travel a whole world as a speaker. She wrote a book in 1927 called My Religion, where she advocated the teachings of Christian theology and a mystic called Emanuel Swedenborg, who believed that the second coming of Christ had already came. I don't know, man. I studied a lot of religion when I was younger, and all of this that he was writing sounds exhausting. It's important because it was important of knowing her. She was super religious after all. I have to wrap this up, though, this podcast, because I spent like a whole day just writing, and I know this is a shorter episode, and we're supposed to eat a big barbecue meal shortly after this. Second time on this podcast, so we go eat a meal somehow that was barbecue from this place, and like I don't do this often. It's the second time. This is the first time since we've recorded the E. Cummings episode that we're eating at here, this place. So there you go. I guess that's all you need to know. This place is steeped in Lost in the Library lore. But wrapping up the script, after days of research and frankly a baby who had just had terrible temper tantrums in between, Helen Keller met every single president between Grover Cleveland and Lyndon B. Johnson. And no, she did not get peed on by Lyndon B. Johnson, you sick fucks. Did you ever hear that story about Lyndon Johnson?
No.
As a power move, whenever his Secret Service agents came, he would like whip out his cock and just pee on them. It happened like a couple
No
times.
stage fright, huh?
No. He also was known to have a massive schlong.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they had to hold it for him?
I mean, he was just a reckless human being. Sick fucks. Anne's husband, John Albert Massey, would die in 1932. You know, he was the guy who helped her in a lot of her writings and helped her specifically in the first book she wrote. Anne would also die a few years later in 1936 after she suffered a coronary thrombosis and fell into a coma. Helen was holding her hand when she finally died. A new helper lived with Helen that wasn't Peter for the rest of this helper's life, named Polly Thompson, who would be with her until 1960. So, like, she was there for about 25 years. And I feel like I'm not doing justice to Polly. So to give her more than a spare cracker, she was also so important to Helen that Polly Thompson, Anne Sullivan, and Helen Keller are all buried next to one another. Helen Keller in 1961 began experiencing series of strokes. She would live in her home in Easton, Connecticut, still attending events when requested, but her health would fail her over the next course of the decade. She would be elected in the National Women's Hall of Fame and also received a Presidential Medal of Freedom from Lyndon B. Johnson himself. She would pass away at the age of 87 on June 1st, 1968. Much closer to our lives than you expected. Our parents were alive at this time. To end today's episode, though, I would like to add that during the 1950s, due to her advocacy in the socialism and helping out, underprivileged children, she was flagged by an agency that didn't really like them damned commies. If you would have guessed that J. Edgar Hoover came into this story, you, my friend, deserve a golden star sticker. Because by the time she was in her 70s, she was put on an FBI watch list for radical agitators. They straight up had like a 45-page report on her activities that were just gathering information on a deaf-blind person, I guess. Like, what was she going to do? Like, storm the Capitol and take a shit on Nancy Pelosi's desk? I assume that she was a senator back then. Honestly, her age checks out. And that note, we're going to end the podcast. Anything you want to add, Jason? How much have you learned about Helen Keller?
Quite a bit. Quite a bit.
Is it okay to make fun of her now?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Anybody who's listened to this can make fun of Helen Keller all she wants.
You can make fun of whoever you want.
Yeah, why not? Fuck it.
Why not?
I guess. They probably don't make fun of somebody who's dying in front of your eyes. It's kind of fucked up. But,
yeah, that would be a little upsetting. But hey, maybe that's some people are into that.
I mean, it's wild how much she's influenced so many different people and how much how like deep her roots are throughout all of American history with all the people she knew and was friends with, and like literally all I know her as is like jokes on fucking Family Guy, like basically.
Yeah. What a legacy.
I know, what a legacy. So my Patreon is Lost in the Library podcast on Patreon. Follow me there. Send any emails at lostinthelibrarypodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram. Again, Lost in the Library there. And I have a Substack where you can find my work at Fil Deptula, so just my name. Everything is always under development as of recording, and everything is free. Here are the works by Helen Keller I used that were all found on Project Gutenberg. The Story of My Life, Optimism, an Essay, The Song of the Wall, The World I Live. The Frost King is on scribd.com. Perkins.org has also had Frost King Incident, and also the way back articles on Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan. Helen Keller in Love, a novel of unthinkable romance by Chris Bordessa on Wired.com. Helen Keller's Favorite Food was an American classic by Brianna Lopez on Tasting Table, incorporating disability studies into second U.S. history classroom. The Radical Lives of Helen Keller by Bradley T. Toland. HelenKellerInternational.org. The Marxist.org references and archives of Helen Keller. Pop Culture and the Enduring Legacy of Helen Keller by Lawrence Carter Long, and Why I Became an IWW by Helen Keller. Some wiki sites I had to use were Samuel Gridley Howe, Phillips Brooks, Anne Sullivan, American Braille, My Religion, and, of course, Helen Keller. I am fucking sick of talking about Helen Keller, I'll tell you what. But I did want to do this one for a long time, so I'm glad it's with you. I hope that all the Family Guy references are even funnier. Oh, did we even talk about the fact that there are whole conspiracy theories now about how Helen Keller was faking it?
Yeah.
We did.
Oh, no, we didn't on this podcast, no.
That's like one of the craziest things I can think of. When you look at that pictures of her staring blankly without blinking, I don't think she's faking it.
Or she's very talented.
I got to show you later in life how she lip read, dude, like sticking a finger in her people's mouths, like on their lips. It's one of the wildest things in the world.
I feel like I saw that on Pornhub the other week. Something like that.
And on that note, thanks, Jason.